I walked through the door earlier than usual, something I rarely did. The moment I stepped inside, I felt a shift, something off about the house. The usual calmness, the familiar feel of home, was suddenly replaced by an odd, unsettling atmosphere. Her bag and keys, which she always left in the kitchen, were instead sitting in the hallway. It was a small detail, but it stood out. I shrugged it off, assuming she had just gotten busy and left things where they didn't belong. It was unlike her, sure, but I'd seen her distracted before. I shook the thought from my head and walked into the bedroom, hoping for a quiet evening after a long day. But the sight that greeted me made my breath catch in my throat. There, folded neatly on the bed, was a shirt I didn't recognize. It was a simple, plain thing, nothing flashy, no designer label, but the unfamiliarity of it was enough to make my stomach twist. It wasn't like I had never seen her wear new things before, but this one was different. This shirt was different. I stood frozen for a moment, staring at it, trying to process. Was it hers? Was it mine? And why hadn't she mentioned it? I couldn't remember the last time she bought clothes like this. Clothes I'd never seen her wear. Why would she hide it from me? The thought gnawed at me as I walked closer to the bed. I could almost feel my pulse in my ears as I touched the fabric. It wasn't rough, but it wasn't anything special either. And still, I felt this pit in my stomach grow wider with every second I stared at it. I quickly placed her bag on the couch, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling crawling up my spine. My eyes wandered around the room, but nothing seemed to help. The room still felt foreign, too quiet. I glanced at the clock. It was a little after 6 p.m. She wasn't home yet, which was unusual. We usually had dinner around this time, or at least a quick catch-up before we got lost in our respective hobbies. She was a creature of habit, a steady rhythm to her day that I'd come to rely on. I sighed and walked over to the window, hoping some fresh air might clear my head. I drew the blinds open and looked outside. The sun was setting, casting a soft glow across the neighborhood. And there, standing at the gate of our building, was him, her colleague, the one she always stayed late with, the one she always claimed was just a friend. He was standing there, glancing around as if waiting for something, a slight smile on his face. I couldn't explain why, but in that moment, everything felt wrong. My gut twisted as I watched him. He caught sight of me, and his face broke into a casual smile, like we were friends. I forced myself to wave back, trying to push down the suspicion that was creeping into my thoughts. Why did he look so comfortable? Why was he here so early? My thoughts were interrupted as I saw her come into view. Just a few steps behind him, walking toward the gate, a smile on her face, but it was quick. It didn't reach her eyes. She saw me, and the moment her gaze locked with mine, she quickly looked away. Part of me wanted to run downstairs and ask her what was going on. Why was he here? But I stayed rooted in place, frozen in my thoughts. I turned back to the bedroom, my mind racing. My heart pounded louder now as I approached the shirt again. 1,000 questions ran through my mind. Was it hers? Had she bought it just recently? Why would she leave it on the bed, knowing I'd notice? Was it for me to see, or was I supposed to ignore it? She had always been careful with details like this, always aware of what I noticed and how I'd react. This was different. I felt a surge of frustration building inside me. Before I could overthink it too much, I heard the door open downstairs. My legs moved before I could stop them, and I quickly made my way down to the living room. I stood by the window and waited for her to come in. She entered, looking just the way she always did, calm, composed, her bag hanging from her shoulder. But something was off about her today, too. Her smile was a little too quick, her steps a little too light, like she was trying to convince herself that everything was fine. She walked into the living room, setting her bag on the couch as if nothing was wrong. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, though it felt strained. "How was your day?" "Good," she replied a little too quickly. "Busy. You know how it is. Lots of stuff to get done before the weekend." I nodded, watching her as she dropped her keys onto the table and then turned back to me with that same smile. It was almost like she was trying to rush through the conversation, not allowing me time to ask anything else. I could feel a tension in the air, but I couldn't place it yet. She didn't seem like she was hiding something, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. Why was I so on edge? Where did the shirt come from? I asked, trying to sound casual, but I could hear the tightness in my own voice. She froze, just for a moment, before looking down at the shirt on the bed, then back at me. "Oh, this?" she said, waving her hand as if dismissing it. "I must have forgotten to put it away. It's just a shirt from the new collection at work. Nothing special." She said it so easily, but I didn't believe it. The way she said nothing special sounded forced, like she was trying to sell me on an idea that didn't fit. I glanced at the shirt again, and this time, I could see the tiny tag peeking out, something that wasn't like her usual choices. It was a detail, but it felt deliberate, like she was trying to make it seem unimportant when it clearly was. "You didn't mention it before?" I said, unable to hide the suspicion in my voice now. She hesitated just for a moment. It was subtle, but I caught it. She quickly shifted her gaze to the side, her lips pulling into a small smile. "Oh, I didn't think it was anything worth mentioning. You know how it is, just a simple purchase." I nodded, but inside, something was off. I didn't know what, but I could feel the weight of her words pressing against me. She quickly changed the subject, talking about something trivial that had happened at work. A small incident with a colleague I didn't know. The sudden shift in topic was jarring, and I could tell she was doing it to avoid any further questioning. I let her talk, though my mind was still on the shirt, on the way she had dodged my question. There was something she wasn't telling me, something I wasn't supposed to know, but I couldn't put my finger on it, couldn't point it out exactly. I felt like I was grasping at air, trying to hold on to something I couldn't quite catch, but I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. She seemed perfectly normal, as if nothing had changed, as if the conversation we just had hadn't left 1,000 questions in the air between us. But I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. I didn't have proof, not yet, but the doubt in my mind was enough to send me into a spiral of suspicions I couldn't silence. She left soon after, as if nothing had happened, and I was left standing there, the unanswered questions piling up inside me. And though I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment or detail that had set me off, I knew that something had changed. It wasn't just the shirt. It wasn't just the way she avoided looking me in the eye. It was everything. The little things she had said, the things she hadn't said, and the way she had tried to cover it all up. The doubts were there, but they felt too distant to confront. For now, all I could do was wait. Over the next few days, the unease in me only grew. That feeling, the nagging sensation that something was wrong, lingered like an uninvited guest. I tried to push it away, tell myself that I was overthinking things, but the more I watched her, the more certain I became that something was off. She was different. Her behavior had shifted subtly, but unmistakably. It wasn't anything I could point to directly, no glaring signs or dramatic changes, but it was there, woven into the fabric of our everyday interactions. She started coming home later and later from work. Not hours late, but consistently by 30 minutes or so. Small enough to be explained away, but enough to make me wonder what she was really doing during that time. I'd ask her about her day, but her answers always seemed too rehearsed, too quick. I noticed her eyes darting away whenever I asked specific questions, as if she was afraid I might see through the calm exterior she had so carefully constructed. At first, I dismissed it. I told myself she was busy. After all, her job had become more demanding lately, and I was trying to be understanding. But then came the little details, small shifts in her demeanor that felt wrong. There were the strange texts. She had always kept her phone on the counter, face down, but now it seemed like she was doing everything to hide it. Her phone was constantly locked, and whenever it buzzed, she would quickly pick it up and step into another room. She'd never done that before. When I asked her about it, she'd tell me it was nothing, just work stuff, just messages from colleagues, and I'd nod, trying to ignore the weight of her words. But inside, I felt like something was slipping through my fingers. Then came the night she left her phone on the kitchen counter. I was doing the dishes when I saw it, sitting there innocently, the glow of the screen reflecting off the counter. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't the type of person to snoop, to go looking for trouble where none existed. But something about that moment felt different. I grabbed the phone, unlocked it with a quick swipe, and saw the message that would change everything. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. The message itself was short, but it was enough to make my stomach drop. I can't wait to see you. You're my biggest weakness. There was no name attached, just that single sentence, followed by a string of emojis. My eyes flickered over the message again and again, trying to make sense of it. My breath caught in my throat as my mind ran wild with the possibilities. I didn't want to believe it, but there it was, staring at me from the screen. I quickly put the phone down, my hands shaking. Who was this person? And why was she so eager to see them? I couldn't stay still anymore. I moved to the living room, pacing back and forth, trying to hold onto some semblance of control. I wanted to confront her then and there, ask her what was going on, demand answers. But I couldn't. I had no proof. I had nothing but a text that could be explained away. Just a harmless flirtation, maybe, or something that didn't mean anything at all. But my instincts screamed at me that it meant something. Felt like a betrayal, even if I couldn't see the full picture. When she came home later that night, I barely said a word to her. The silence between us was suffocating, and she seemed to notice the shift in the air. Her eyes kept darting to mine, but she didn't say anything either. The dinner I had made sat untouched on the table, growing cold as we both sat in an uncomfortable stillness. Eventually, I broke the silence. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes widened, and she tried to cover it with a laugh. "I told you, just at work," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. But there was something in her tone that didn't sit right. She wasn't looking at me. She wasn't even looking in my direction. She seemed distant, lost in her thoughts. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to know the truth. The weight of my questions hung heavy in the air, suffocating the room. A few days later, I had my chance. I decided to follow her. It was a risk, a decision that went against everything I believed in. Trusting her was the foundation of our marriage. But I couldn't ignore the growing sense of doubt in my gut. I had to know what she was really doing during those late-night returns from work, the unexplained trips, the sudden phone secrecy. I wasn't about to stand by and watch everything I built with her come crashing down without understanding why. That day, she left just like any other day, dressed in a blazer, her hair pulled back neatly. She smiled at me on her way out, but there was a nervous energy in her step that I couldn't ignore. I grabbed my keys and slipped out behind her, keeping a careful distance as I followed her car through the city streets. My heart hammered in my chest, and every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around, to let this go. But I couldn't. Not anymore. She didn't go to the office. She didn't drive to the usual places where I knew her colleagues hung out. Instead, she drove toward a part of town I didn't recognize. A quieter area, full of residential buildings and empty streets. I parked a few blocks away, trying to remain hidden, and watched her as she parked her car in front of a building I'd never seen before. She didn't go inside immediately. Instead, she stood by her car for a moment, texting someone on her phone. The wind picked up, blowing her hair around as she typed. Then, after a few minutes, a man walked up to her. My stomach churned. It was him, her colleague, the same one she'd been working late with for the past few weeks. I watched them exchange a few words, their body language too familiar, too comfortable. He gave her a brief hug, not one of the usual friendly kinds, but one that lingered a little too long. It was as if they had an understanding, some secret between them that neither of them was ready to share. I felt like I was watching a dream slip away. But it wasn't a dream. It was my life unraveling before me. They walked into the building together, laughing quietly. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I didn't need to. The sight of them together, so casual, so at ease, told me everything I needed to know. I stayed in the car, unable to move. My mind raced, but the shock of it all kept me frozen in place. What was I supposed to do now? Confront them? Call her and demand an explanation? I didn't know. I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure I could handle the truth if I went in there. But I knew I couldn't just sit here either. I had to get the full picture. The next few days felt like an eternity. The image of her with him haunted me, replaying in my mind over and over again. The way they had stood there together, laughing, so comfortable in each other's company. It wasn't something I could easily forget. It wasn't just a casual encounter. It was something deeper, something more real than I was prepared to face. I hadn't confronted her yet. There was something inside me that wasn't ready to have that conversation. I wasn't ready to have my suspicions confirmed. I wanted more proof, something undeniable. I wasn't going to let this slide. Not without understanding the full scope of what had been happening behind my back. That evening, she came home later than usual. She was always tired, but tonight, it was different. She didn't even take her coat off before heading straight to the bathroom. It was as if she wanted to avoid me. I stood by the door, waiting for her to come back out, my mind racing with everything I had learned in the last few days. It was so clear now, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. When she came out, I was still standing there, my arms crossed. She looked at me, her expression quickly masking whatever feelings might have flickered across her face when she saw me waiting. "Hey," she said, walking past me, avoiding my eyes as she made her way to the kitchen. "How was your day?" I didn't answer right away. Couldn't. I was too lost in my own head, trying to figure out how to approach the inevitable. "Where's your phone?" I asked instead, my voice steady but firm. Her eyes flickered for a moment. "It's upstairs, I think," she replied, her voice wavering just slightly. I nodded, and for a moment, the silence between us felt thick, suffocating. She kept her back to me as she fidgeted with the coffee machine, trying to avoid eye contact. I knew something was off. I knew that she knew I knew. "Do you mind if I borrow it for a second?" I asked, the words coming out sharper than I intended. She froze. "Why?" she asked, her voice sounding strained now, like she was struggling to maintain her composure. "I just want to check something," I said, keeping my tone controlled. "Nothing serious." She hesitated. Her hand gripped the counter, her fingers turning white as she clenched it. For a long moment, she didn't say anything, and I thought she might refuse outright. But then, without another word, she walked toward the stairs, her feet slow and deliberate. I followed her upstairs, my heart pounding. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I knew that something was about to change. We reached the top of the stairs, and she turned to face me, her eyes still avoiding mine. "Here," she said, handing me the phone without a word. I took it from her hands, my fingers brushing against hers. For a moment, I could feel the tension between us. The phone was cold in my hand, and it felt like I was holding a piece of evidence, a tangible confirmation of everything I had feared. I opened the screen, and without hesitation, went straight for her messages. There it was, just like before. The conversation I had seen that day, clear and undeniable. "I can't wait to see you. You're my biggest weakness." Below the message, a hotel room number I didn't recognize stared back at me. My chest tightened, and I could feel the blood drain from my face. There was no mistaking it. It wasn't some innocent exchange. This was something else. The messages didn't lie. And that hotel room number, it told me everything I needed to know. I checked the time. The date matched. I checked the receipts on her bank account a few days later, just to be sure. And there it was, on that same day she had made a reservation at that very hotel. I closed the phone and handed it back to her, my heart racing. She took it from my hand, her fingers trembling as she gripped it tightly. There was nothing else to say. The proof was there. There was no more room for doubt, no more excuses to make. I watched her face closely. Her eyes, once filled with calm, now showed something else, fear. She tried to speak, but no words came out. She just stood there, her body tense, frozen in place. "You've been lying to me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She just stood there, trembling. "What else?" I asked, my voice rising, barely able to keep the calm facade intact. "How long has this been going on?" She lowered her gaze to the floor, her hands clenching the phone. She couldn't look at me, She couldn't face me. I didn't mean for it to happen, she whispered finally, her voice barely audible. It just happened. I could hear the desperation in her voice, the tremor of guilt. But the words didn't matter anymore. I had the proof. The pieces had fallen into place. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I'd built a life with, she was gone. The reality of it hit me hard, like a punch to the gut. Why? I asked, my voice cracking. Why him? Why anyone? Her head jerked up, and for a moment, her eyes met mine, raw with emotion. She looked like she was about to say something, to apologize, to explain, but the words didn't come. She looked defeated, like she knew she couldn't fix this. And for once, I couldn't find the strength to comfort her, to make things right. I wasn't the one who had done anything wrong. Tell me everything, I said, my voice flat. How long has it been? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she closed her eyes, as if summoning the courage to confess, to give me something I could understand. It's been a few months, she said softly. It wasn't supposed to mean anything, but then it did. My stomach churned as the words sank in. A few months. This had been going on behind my back for months, and I had no idea. I thought I knew her. I thought I understood everything about our relationship, but now I realized how wrong I had been. I didn't know what to say next. What could I say? The trust we'd built, the life we'd created, it was shattered in an instant. The woman I loved had betrayed me, and now I had to decide what to do with that knowledge. I need you to leave, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. She didn't argue. There were no tears, no more apologies. There was nothing left to say. She just nodded and walked out of the room, her steps slow, like she knew this was the end. She didn't look back. And just like that, she was gone. The next day was a blur. I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept replaying the conversation from the night before, the image of her standing there with the phone in her hands, the weight of her admission sinking in. I had known something was wrong, but I hadn't known it would be like this. This was more than a small betrayal, more than a simple lie. This was a complete destruction of everything we had built together. I couldn't bring myself to look at her as she left that morning. I couldn't look her in the eye when I knew what I knew. The house felt emptier than ever, and every corner seemed to whisper the lies she had told me. The weight of it all was suffocating. I hadn't wanted to confront her. I hadn't wanted to know the truth, but now that I did, I wished I could unsee it. I wished I could go back to the days before everything changed. The phone messages, the hotel room reservation, it was all too much to process. It wasn't just the infidelity that stung. It was the realization that she had been so careful, so calculated, and I had been completely blind to it. How had I not seen the signs before? Was I so caught up in our routine that I missed the cracks in our relationship? Was I so blinded by love that I refused to see the truth? She called later in the afternoon. I saw her name flash across the screen, and for a moment, I considered ignoring it, pretending that I wasn't home, that I didn't care. But something in me wanted answers. I needed closure, or at least an explanation, no matter how painful. I answered the phone, my voice cold. What do you want? There was a long pause on the other end, and then she spoke, her voice trembling. I need to talk to you, she said softly. Please. I didn't respond immediately. Part of me wanted to hang up, to end it all right there. But another part of me, the part that still cared for her, despite everything, wanted to hear what she had to say. Come over, I said finally, my words clipped. But this is it. No more lies. She agreed, and we arranged for her to come over that evening. The whole day felt like it dragged on forever. I couldn't concentrate on anything, work, meals, nothing seemed to matter. My thoughts were consumed by what had happened, by the betrayal that had shattered everything I thought I knew about us. When she arrived, she looked different. There was no makeup, no carefully curated outfit. She was in jeans and a t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked tired, worn down by the weight of her own guilt. She stood at the door for a moment, hesitating, as if unsure of what to say. Come in, I said, my voice flat. She stepped inside, and the silence between us was deafening. There was no small talk, no pleasantries. The air felt thick with the tension we both knew existed but neither of us wanted to address. She walked into the living room and sat down on the couch, her hands clasped tightly together in her lap. I remained standing, watching her, waiting for her to speak. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't even know where to start." I crossed my arms and leaned against the wall, not sure whether I wanted to hear it. "Start with the truth," I said, my voice low. "Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out." She took a deep breath, her eyes shifting away from mine. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, quietly, she began. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said, her voice shaking. "I never meant for things to get out of control. I never meant to hurt you. But it happened, and I couldn't stop it." Her words felt like a knife to the chest. The more she spoke, the more it became clear how deep the betrayal ran. She told me about the first time she had met him, how it had been innocent enough at first, just a casual chat at work. She told me about how they had bonded over late nights and shared frustrations at work, how he had listened to her when she felt alone, when she thought I wasn't paying attention. And then one night, it just happened, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wasn't thinking. It was stupid. I know that now." I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the rush of anger that was threatening to spill out. "You're telling me this like it's some kind of mistake," I said, my voice sharp. "It wasn't a mistake. You chose him. You chose to betray me." She winced at the harshness in my voice, but she didn't try to defend herself. Instead, she continued, her voice growing quieter. "I never stopped loving you," she said, her words almost lost in the silence. I don't even know how to explain it, but it felt like I was losing myself, like I wasn't enough, and he made me feel seen again. I felt my stomach turn as I listened to her words. She was trying to explain herself, trying to justify what had happened, but nothing she said could undo the damage. Nothing she said could erase the image of her with him, the warmth they shared, the bond that had been hidden from me for so long. "I don't know what to say," she continued, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but it's all I have." I stood there for a moment, not sure how to respond. The words I had been holding back felt like they were suffocating me. I wanted to scream, to demand more answers, to lash out at the injustice of it all. But I didn't. I stayed silent, trying to control the storm of emotions inside me. Finally, I spoke. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You've broken my trust. You've destroyed everything we had. I can't keep living in this lie." Her face crumpled as the reality of my words hit her. "Please," she begged, reaching out for me. "Don't say that. We can fix this. We can work through it." But I shook my head. "No, we can't. You chose this. You chose him. And now I have to choose what's best for me." Her tears fell freely now, but I didn't move to comfort her. Couldn't. Not when everything had fallen apart. Not when I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. "I'm done," I said quietly, my voice breaking. "I don't want to fight for something that you've already given up on." She stayed quiet for a long time, her tears soaking into her hands as she tried to hide her face from me. But I couldn't look at her anymore. The woman I had loved was gone, replaced by someone who had betrayed me in a way I couldn't forgive. I walked to the bedroom, grabbed a suitcase and started packing her things. I didn't have the energy to argue, to try to salvage anything. It was over, and deep down I knew it had been over for a long time. I was just too blind to see it. When I came back to the living room, she was still sitting on the couch, her head bowed in shame. She didn't try to stop me, didn't beg me to stay. I had already made up my mind, and she knew it. "I'll be gone by tonight," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I'm sorry. For everything." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The days that followed were a blur. Everything felt like it had been wiped away in an instant, leaving me with nothing but the aftermath of what had happened. The house was quieter, emptier, and yet the silence was deafening. The absence of her presence was a constant reminder of what had just occurred. Every corner of our home felt unfamiliar, as though the walls themselves had witnessed the destruction of everything I had once believed in. I had packed her things that night, just as I had told her I would. When she left, she didn't look back. She didn't try to apologize again or beg for another chance. She just walked out, leaving me with nothing but the shattered remnants of what we had shared. There was no closure, no final conversation that could put an end to the pain. The woman I had loved was gone, and in her place was someone I no longer recognized. In the days after she left, I spent most of my time trying to adjust to a life that no longer felt like my own. I cleaned, though it felt pointless. I went through the motions of daily life, eating, sleeping, working, but none of it brought me any peace. Every little thing reminded me of her. The empty space on the couch where she used to sit, the half-empty closet where her clothes once hung, the scent of her perfume still lingering in the air. It was like everything in this house had been touched by her, and now it all felt wrong. I knew I had to get rid of the reminders. I couldn't keep holding on to the past, couldn't keep pretending that things were okay when everything had fallen apart. So, I began clearing out the remnants of our life together. I started with the things that were easiest to part with, the clothes she had left behind, the knickknacks she had scattered around the house. I threw away her makeup, her toiletries, everything that was hers but didn't belong to me anymore. It felt like a cruel form of cleansing, but it was the only way I knew how to start over. But no matter how much I threw away, no matter how many memories I packed into boxes and shoved into the closet, there was one thing I couldn't get rid of: her photo album. It sat on the coffee table, untouched, staring at me like a cruel reminder of the life we had built together. I couldn't bring myself to open it. I couldn't look at the smiling faces in those pictures and pretend that everything hadn't changed. For the first time in my life, I felt truly alone. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to feel betrayed. I kept thinking back to that moment when I had seen them together, the way she had looked at him, the way they had shared that laugh. That moment had shattered everything. It wasn't just a kiss or a fleeting touch. It was the realization that she had built a world with him, one that I had never been a part of. She had kept it hidden from me, kept it secret, and now I was left to pick up the pieces of a life that I had thought was real. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. She had chosen him over me, and there was no going back from that. I couldn't just forgive her. I couldn't just forget what she had done. The trust that we had shared was gone, and once that trust was broken, there was no rebuilding it. There was no going back to the way things had been. The person I had loved was gone, replaced by someone I couldn't understand. But even as I stewed in my anger, I couldn't help but wonder about him. The man she had betrayed me for. The man who had somehow become more important than everything we had built together. I had never met him, never seen his face, but I had seen his name in her messages, seen the way she had reacted when I brought him up. She had been defensive, evasive, and I knew then that he wasn't just a friend. He was something more. But what was it? I decided I needed to find out. I didn't know why, but I had to confront him. I had to see the man who had taken my place, the man who had made her smile in ways I no longer could. I wasn't even sure what I was hoping to achieve. Maybe I wanted answers, or maybe I just wanted to make him feel the same pain I was feeling. So, I did what anyone would do in my situation. I looked him up. His name was Peter, and it didn't take long to find out everything I needed to know. He worked with her at the same company, in the same department. They had been working together for over a year, but their relationship hadn't started until much later. I scrolled through his social media profiles, looking for anything that would give me a clue about who he was, about what kind of person would come between a marriage like ours. There was nothing remarkable about him. He looked ordinary, average height, short brown hair, a few pictures from family vacations and outings with friends. But what caught my eye were the pictures of him with her. They weren't anything inappropriate, but they were mate in a way I hadn't expected. They were sitting together at lunch, laughing, arms draped over each other. These were the kinds of pictures I should have been in, the kind of memories I should have shared with her. The anger bubbled up inside me again, stronger this time. This wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It was a betrayal of everything we had been. I felt like a fool, like I had been living in a dream world while she built a secret life behind my back. But I couldn't confront her again. Not yet. She had already made her decision, and now it was time for me to make mine. I didn't need to know any more. I didn't need to understand why she had chosen him. I didn't need answers. What I needed was closure. The next day, I made a decision. I would meet him. I found his address and set a plan in motion. I didn't want to make a scene, didn't want to cause any trouble. I just needed to see him, to let him know that I knew. Let him know that I knew what he had done to me, to her, to us. That evening, I drove to his apartment building. It wasn't far, just a few miles from our house, but the drive felt like it took forever. My heart was racing, my hands gripping the steering wheel, but I knew I had to do this. I had to face the man who had been the other half of my wife's secret life. I parked down the street and waited for him to come out. I didn't want to make this too easy for him. I wanted him to feel the weight of what he had done. When he finally emerged from the building, I got out of the car. I had to take a deep breath before walking toward him. He didn't see me at first, and when he did, his eyes widened in surprise. But there was no fear in his gaze, no recognition of what he had done. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice casual, like he hadn't just ripped apart everything I had known. I stepped forward, my voice cold. "You've already done enough," I said, my words sharp. "I just came to let you know that I know about you and her." His face paled slightly, but he didn't speak. He didn't have to. The silence between us spoke volumes. I wanted him to feel guilty, to understand that he wasn't some innocent bystander. He had played a part in this, and now he had to own it. "You're not the one she chose," I said, my voice trembling with the weight of everything I was feeling. "She didn't choose you, Peter. She was running from herself. You're just the escape." He didn't respond. He just stood there, looking at me, and in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't about him. It wasn't even about her anymore. It was about me. I had to let go. I had to stop living in the past and stop allowing their actions to define me. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, silent. When I returned home, the house felt even emptier. Her things were gone, but on the table there was a small box. Inside, I found a photograph of her and Peter at a park, embracing. On the back, a note. "We were never finished." Below that was a key with a number, 203. It led me to an unfamiliar neighborhood. Inside the apartment, the truth hit me. She hadn't just been unfaithful. She had built a parallel life. She took everything from me and left nothing behind but an empty space. I didn't seek revenge, didn't destroy anything. I packed her things, moved to a new city, and started fresh. The lies and betrayals of the past were behind me. I reconnected with old friends, started running, and focused on living life the way I wanted. Her calls went unanswered, and slowly, she became a distant memory. I found freedom in my solitude, in taking control of my life again. And as the days went by, I understood that moving on was the most powerful thing I could do.